Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Project Freelance. What is up, everybody? I hope you are having a great Monday. I hope that your weekend was swell. Whatever day you're listening to this podcast, just know that Project Freelance is released every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, just in time for your morning commute, even though right now, not many people are doing a morning commute because of the pandemic. But regardless, still going to be coming out at 7 a.m. PST. Thank you guys. This week on the podcast, I am talking with Marc of Minute7. Marc is an entrepreneur. He started in personal banking, and he dove into working with Minute7 to kind of help facilitate some new features and to help it grow. And I'm really excited to have him on to talk about this software. If you guys are curious about Minute7, it helps you track your time. It helps you track your expenses. And it's absolutely amazing. I think that an app like this should have been created a long time ago. But, you know, the fact that it is here now, I think that it's really going to help a lot of freelancers out. And I'm stoked for you guys to listen to this podcast. If you are new, please hit that subscribe button because, you know, these come out every Monday. And I think you guys need to be a part of this. And I got to let you know before we jump into this that I have a book out called No Tracers, an Urban Explorer's Diary. And it's all about exploring abandoned places that I've gone to over the past few years. And I would love for you to check it out. There's a link down in the description. But without further ado, let's jump into this podcast with Marc of Minute7. Marc, please introduce yourself and what it is you do to the Project Freelance audience.
Sure. So my name is Marc Summey. I run Minute7, which is a SaaS business that does time and expense tracking for professional services firms.
So before we get into Minute7, I do want to talk a little bit about you as an entrepreneur. So tell me a little bit about how you got into entrepreneurship and what gave you that bug, that initial bug.
Sure. Yeah. So I worked at a large bank out of college, and I was in commercial banking, which just means you're lending money to businesses, and that's really where the spark was formed, I guess, to get involved in entrepreneurship. So, you know, we lent money to small businesses. Through that, I got to see and meet and get to know small business owners. Most of them, you know, had started the business themselves. They were oftentimes, you know, looking for a loan to grow their business. So there was like a critical point in their business, or maybe it was going through a tough time and it needed, a loan to get through the tough time. Um, so I got really good exposure to a number of different types of businesses and other, different types of entrepreneurs, and that's really where my interest peaked. And I thought, well, I still relatively young. I could see my career path here as a commercial lender. I could see, what my boss's job was and my boss's boss, and that just didn't look as interesting to me or sound as interesting to me as when I was talking to these entrepreneurs and hearing what they were working on and what they were doing. That just seemed much more interesting. So that was really the spark that led me to start thinking about how I could do something different.
And then before the banking stuff, what made you want to get into that field in the first place? Like what inspired you to get into commercial lending and all of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, which is like a lot of Midwestern towns. It through had a good run in the 80s and 90s when the U.S. was making a lot of things, and then towards as technology became increasingly important and we moved a lot of jobs outside of the U.S., it was adversely affected. So I went to school and lived in Dayton, Ohio. I graduated, uh, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity in Ohio. And so I set my sights on Chicago, which I think Chicago does this to a lot of folks in the Midwest just because Dayton's similar to a lot of towns in the Midwest that just didn't have a lot going on in Chicago. Sort of sucks in a lot of people from the surrounding states because it has a much more, diverse list of industries and and job opportunities. And so that's what that brought me to. I moved to Chicago without a job, and was living on a buddy's couch and looking for work. And I had a finance degree. I don't. Looking back on why I chose finance, I don't have a real specific reason. I kind of like. I still do enjoy finance in terms of I like. I feel like it tells a little bit of a story of a business. So when I like looking at numbers and thinking about what that means about the business, like the profitability and the margins of a business, and how a business performs in certain economic cycles. Like those things are all things I'm interested and curious about. So that's probably why I started in finance. But then why commercial banking? It was I was looking for a job, and it I think I didn't have a lot of different opportunities, but the opportunity I did get was in commercial banking, and I accepted it because I needed a job, but also because I saw, I think, the it's sort of a good. I didn't think about this at the time, but looking back, maybe it's easier to say this. It did give me broad exposure to business in general, if that makes sense. So like my customers were, everything from some technology service company that's sort of helping customers install new software, or it could be that, or it could be like an oil services business that's helping install, you know, some type of oil product. And so you got really broad exposure to different businesses, and that I was pretty curious about business, and I felt like commercial banking would sort of satisfy that curiosity, or I got to see it and learn a lot of different things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I talk to a lot of, freelancers on this podcast. We have one come out every week. And so it's different guests from different industries. So it's always interesting to talk to, different entrepreneurs. And you're a little bit different because you created a software, and all the other people I talk to are, videographers or musicians or, whatever they do. And so one of my questions is, do you think it's necessary to go to school and get a higher education for what you are pursuing as a career? For you, I feel like it's a little bit different. Can you talk a little bit about schooling as far as like what you learned and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's actually a particularly good question right now, because I think the higher education system is in flux. It's going to be an interesting couple of years for colleges and universities. Yeah, I mean, I had a really good time at school. I think there's a lot of social value in it. I have some really great friends. I had some really good experiences. The actual like training for my job. I mean, I was a finance major and went into a finance job. I can't say that I could, that I was like ultra prepared. There's still a lot of on the job training that I had to do. Um, I don't know. And my general thinking on higher education is that it's going to change in the next 5 to 10 years in a pretty meaningful way. Um, I just The cost of it just doesn't make a lot of sense right now. I don't think that it necessarily does a great job at like training people for actual jobs. Um, so I think because of those two things, you might see, I think you already are starting to see different types of ways to learn trades and learn specific skills. Certainly around technology, there's a lot of, I'm not a technical person by trade, but if I were like a 16, 17-year-old kid right now and I was interested in technology, there's definitely a more cost efficient way to learn how to write software than to go to like a 4-year college degree, I think. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of, especially when I have 3 young children, it's interesting to think about that. I mean, I'm still leery of the potential cost of college, um, but I don't know if like it's going to be the same thing. They're all under the age of 5, so they're still pretty young. So it may or may not be a similar type market for higher education when they're ready. So it's I don't know. It's hard for me to predict. What do you think, Kay? Do you have any thoughts on what higher education's going to experience over the next couple of years?
Yeah, where it's
Yeah.
going. So, I mean, I went to trade school. I didn't go to like a 4-year college. I got a bachelor's degree in film production in 3 years. I was studying overseas at the time, so I kind of had a little bit different experience when it comes to like college and stuff. But I personally think that if you want to learn a trade, you should go to a trade school. You shouldn't necessarily go to a college because like for me personally, I was like, why should I take science and math when I want to learn how to make videos, and I want to learn how to be a videographer and an editor and stuff. So I decided, my dad told me like you have to get a degree before you do what you want because that's how he was raised. And so I was like, okay, well, let me kind of play this system and just get a degree doing what I want to do because I know what I want to do. So it worked in my favor, but like you said, I learned a lot more on the job. Like I still learn things every day about, how to light things differently or how to edit something differently. So I think that going forward, for example, my roommate that I live with, he is a film student right now during this pandemic, and like all of his projects that he had to do were group projects, with his like film class, and they couldn't do any of their projects because you need to be in a group and we're supposed to be like quarantined. So it's been very interesting to hear the experience of somebody that's living in college through this time. And so I think going forward, I think everything's going to be online. I think that people are not necessarily going to do in-person college. I mean, look at what's happening right now. Like international students are having trouble because they have like basically a contract that says that they have to take their classes in person. Like they can only take 3 classes online, and right now we have to take every class online. So it's very interesting to see what they're going to do. Like schools like Harvard are, having a lot of trouble right now, and it's interesting to see these institutions going through this challenge right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward. But I do think that, when your kids, like 13 years from now, the college world's going to be completely different. It's going to be completely different than what it is and what it was. And I think we're starting to see that change now. And I think that this pandemic really brought a lot of things in this world to light. And I think that, going to college is definitely one of those things that it's kind of making everybody question. So it's been very interesting. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting times.
So let's talk about Minute7. Bring me into your jump into the software world.
Yeah, sure. So I had a bunch of twists and turns to get here, but I started out in finance. I kind of, as I mentioned, had that spark for entrepreneurship, and um, so what I did, I figured, I want to work at a startup, but an early stage startup doesn't really need anyone who like understands finance really well. It's not like basically at the early stages you're working on like building something that people want and then figuring out how to tell people that it exists. Um, so I knew my finance skills weren't going to be highly valued from a startup, so I had to think of other things I could do. And that what I landed on, because I didn't know how to code, was on marketing. So at the time, this is 2007, 8 timeframe. Google had a lot of tutorial information out there, like to help people understand sort of paid search marketing, obviously, but also at the time SEO strategies were wildly different, but there was still a lot of SEO learning to be done. So um, that's where I focused my time, and so I was moonlighting. During the day I was working in the bank, and at night I was posting myself as a service provider for online marketing on Craigslist, and I got a couple of customers, and got to the point where I felt like I could actually do the job for a startup, and so that was my path into. So I joined. I left the bank and joined a early stage startup here in Chicago in 2009, and then since then I've been sort of bouncing between different startups and in the software world, mostly with a couple of stints in finance again. But um, during that time, where I sort of crystallized my thinking was around SaaS. So I through the various jobs I had, I got exposed to software as a service or SaaS. And what the things I liked about it was like one that had a recurring or subscription revenue model, um, which, back from my finance training, I really saw the value in that, right? You're not having to like go out and sell a product each day. You could sell it once and that customer could use it for years. Um, and so I really like that. And so, what I decided is I didn't know how to code, so I couldn't build a SaaS business myself. So what I transitioned my thinking or sort of crystallized my thinking around was buying a small software company, and that's how I stumbled into Minute7. So Minute7 was for sale. The owner was looking to sell it. I reached out to him, expressed interest in buying it. We've talked for a while about that, but ultimately couldn't get to an agreement or I couldn't get a deal done with him to buy it outright. But through that conversation, we ended up in a different place where I sort of explained to him what I wanted to do with Minute7, what my goals were, and he got interested in that and said, "Well, why don't we have you run it? I'll give you some ownership of the business." He wasn't running it day to day at the time, so the history of Minute7, it was started in 2008 as a side business by a software developer. He had a full-time job and was just sort of managing it on the side. He knew it needed, someone to manage it day to day and help it grow, and but just didn't have the time to do it, which is why he was looking to sell it. But anyway, so through that conversation, we ended up at this great place where he gave me the autonomy to execute on the plan that I wanted to, and that was 3 years ago. So I've been running Minute7 for 3 years now. We've almost tripled the size of the business in those 3 years, so it's been a really good success so far, and we're working on some things now that I think can help us grow it even more. But it's I'm 41 years old, Kay, and I joke with my wife that I think I finally found something I want to do with my life. It took me a while, but I really am enjoying it, and glad I've found this opportunity and sort of found something I like doing every day.
So did you see how do I ask this question? Basically, like, did you see something missing from like the freelancing world? I mean, like Minute7, if you can tell the audience a little bit more about what it is.
Sure.
I mean, it's like I would love for you to dive more into that, and tell me if you saw like this piece missing from the freelancing world.
Sure. Yeah, good question. So the niche that really Minute7's feeding is like you've probably there's a couple different things that I think help us stand out in this market for time and expense tracking. You probably have seen a lot of companies that do time tracking. You probably have seen separately a lot of companies that do expense tracking. So one thing that's unique about Minute7 is that we do both. So you can track your time and your expense in our system. And the other big thing that we have is we're integrated uh, tightly with QuickBooks. So we can, the common workflow, most common workflow for Minute7 is you have some number of employees who are entering time and expense into Minute7. Then you have a manager who logs into Minute7, reviews and approves those items, and then they push them directly into their QuickBooks account for payroll or for billing purposes. Um, so you could imagine, Kay, like there's a lot of when people are starting out in a business, they're just trying to figure out all these ways. Like your first employee, you're probably having them send you a spreadsheet of their time, or even some cases they're still doing paper, right? There's a paper timesheet that they're filling out, and then the owner or the bookkeeper is having to manually enter that data into QuickBooks. And so what our system really does well is it makes that much more efficient. You're pushing down the time tracking to the employee. You're taking that information and just pushing it into QuickBooks without removing all that manual data entry time suck that people take. on. Um, so, and then the other thing I think that helps us stand out is there's a lot of people that do time and expense tracking, but they try to, like, for example, even in the time tracking space, they're trying to do time tracking for all types of businesses. So they're trying to be the time tracker for the retail store that has someone physically in the store that's clocking in and clocking out, but also trying to be the time tracker for the law firm that just wants to bill hours to a specific customer. And so that gets into the nuance of how people, the interface of our product. But it is a big difference, right? Like the way a retail person tracks their time versus the way a professional services firm tracks their time is meaningfully different. And so our system is really focused on those professional services firms, like freelancers, like you mentioned, that they're mostly tracking their time because they want to get paid. So to stand back for a second, the way I like to think about Minute7 is we make a product that makes it really easy to track your time and then get that data into QuickBooks so you can get paid. So I like to think of us as a way, we help you get paid faster because our product is super easy to use, and it allows you to, take that timesheet and turn it into an invoice, very quickly.
That's great. And can you talk a little bit about like um coming up with like the 30-day free trial, how you guys incentivize people with that? I think that's a great way to, get people to test out your product before they actually, purchase it. So was that model already created when you came on board, or did you like help implement that?
No, I mean, so the trial period it's a pretty standard practice amongst like B2B SaaS businesses. Um, and there's good reason behind it, right? Like if you were thinking about purchasing software, you likely want to like use it before you just jump into start, you know, start say, I'm going to give you my money here, I'm going to start using your product because it's so integral to the business, and like they want to feel it and touch it and sort of validate that it works. So the trial period allows them to do that. And really with ours, there's a lot of moving parts, right? You want your employees to try it out. So our trial, you can invite as many employees as you want to use the system. We have a mobile app. They want to be able to use the mobile app and play around with it. So you can do that during the trial period. They want to sync the data into QuickBooks, and they want to see how the information goes into QuickBooks and where it goes. You can do that with during the trial period. So that's really the reasoning behind those trial periods is because it's so important to the business. They they want to be able to try it, and so we allow them to do that for 30 days before we ask for any money.
I love that. I think it's a great thing that, like you said, it's something that most SaaS and B2B things implement because I mean, as a freelancer, of course, I want to try something out before I buy it. And I've used Mint, I've used all the mileage mile IQ. I have like several different apps that I'm paying for. So the fact that you guys have everything consolidated into one, I think really makes you guys stand out a lot.
Yeah, and so that's another good point. I mean, if you have, let's say you have 10 employees, and you have two apps, one for time, one for expense tracking. Well, then you have to train, the 10 employees on each app. But if you have one app, they only have to learn how to use one thing, and then if um, you don't have to pay. That's the other. There's a cost savings, right? You're basically paying for one app versus having to pay for two, so it's half the cost. Um, so yeah, there's definitely a benefit of being able to do both time and expense, and we try to get that message across to our customers, but they can pretty quickly see that usually.
hmm So, what were some of the challenges you faced when you came on board Minute7, when you started, working more in depth with it?
Yeah,
Did you face any challenges at first, and how did you overcome those?
yeah, good question. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot. So I mean, the founder would have. I'm not speaking out of turn here. He had started the business in 2008. He'd grown it on the side, but he hadn't. It sort of gotten to a certain size, where it was generating some cash for the founder, but he wasn't putting money back into the product. So, the product looked and felt like it was built in 2008, because it was. um, so that was, something he already was aware of before I started working, but that was certainly a focus in the first couple years, was like, we need to put money into the product. So that's what we've been doing. We designed an entire new interface, um, and we added some features. So there was, we're in a competitive environment. There's other products that do things similar. So we need to make sure there was a couple feature gaps that our competitors have that we didn't, that we needed to build. So we built those. Um, and so now we're just in a, that was hard. We had a bunch of users already. So the hard part about that, Kay, is if we have 7,000 users that use our app every day. So if you design a new interface for them, it's good for the new customers, right? Because they're like, oh, great, this thing looks great. But then your 7,000 existing customers are like, you know what? The old system worked. Like, why are you messing with it? So you got to kind of pull all those existing users along with you. Um, and we got them there, but it wasn't, there's certainly a lot of people that don't like change, and most people don't, just the nature of something that you've been used to using. You just want it to be the way that it's always been. So, that part was hard, but it was the right thing for the business, and we're, in a better place because of it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love that you were able to overcome that, and I love that, the old customers were able to adapt to those new features. And my last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
There's a lot of things. um, one thing I knew. I think I knew this, but it sort of has been, reinforced during this time. It's just, things take time to to build. When you're creating things, it just takes time. It's true probably in your field, Kay, like if you're creating a film or photograph or something, to get it the way that you want it to be, or to improve it, it takes time to create things. um, and I just get antsy sometimes that we're not moving fast enough. But 3 years since we've started, we've certainly done a lot of things. So I can look back now and say, like, oh, we've done a lot of cool things. But at the time, it there's certain moments where I just feel frustrated at the pace at which we're moving. um, so I don't know, it's sort of a thing I wish I knew at the beginning, and that I also need to constantly remind myself that making stuff is hard. It takes time. Stay with it. You'll look back on this as a growth period, and as long as you're moving forward and you're getting things done, it's okay if it's not always the as pace as quickly as you like.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. As a freelancer myself, coming out of film school, I studied overseas, and then I moved to California, and I literally didn't know a single person here. So I had to start from zero and build my business. And I had no business background. Like, the only business background I learned was like one class that I took in film school, So I literally had to learn how to do my taxes. I had to learn how to do everything from zero, learn how to network, learn how to connect, all that kind of stuff. And when I was in film school, my dad, I remember him asking one of my professors, like, how long is it going to take for her business to launch? How long will it take for it to be profitable? And they said, it could be 3 to 7 years. That's just the nature of building a business.
Sure.
So I think that I felt the same way, and I still feel like I have a long way to go, but I feel like I'm now at this point where I'm making money. I'm saving, I'm investing now, I'm doing way more with my earnings. And it's really goes to show that the more you work at it, the harder you work at it, and the more you focus, the bigger it will be, the bigger it will get, the bigger your snowball will get that rolls down that hill.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep the momentum going, and so I can totally relate with what you said. But if people want to pick your brain some more, if they want to get Minute7, if they want to start using it, how can they do that? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'd love anyone who's interested. We have a free trial on our website. If you go to minute7.com, that's MINUTE, the number 7.com. You can also sign up for a demo there. So we'll give you a one-on-one demo. We can walk you through the product and answer questions. You can sign up for a demo on our homepage as well. And then yeah, if you anyone wants to talk about entrepreneurship or SaaS or I don't know, anything really. I'm always willing to share my experience if it's helpful. You can reach me. My email address is just Marc, MARC, at minute7.com. And then I'm also on Twitter at just at Marc Summe. It's MARCSUMME. Um, so yeah, feel free to reach out. I'd love to chat.
All right, guys, that was Marc with Minute7. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Project Freelance. If you guys enjoyed it and you want to check out Minute7, I have put links down in the description for you to check out, not only to Minute7, but to Marc's social medias as well. So you guys can follow him, go pick his brain some more, do whatever you got to do. But thank you guys again for listening to Project Freelance. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and some feedback. It really helps the podcast grow on the charts, especially on iTunes. If you guys do send in some feedback and a rating, I will send you a signed photo print from an abandoned building that I have explored. Yes, I explore abandoned places when I'm not freelancing. It's my thing. I love it. I also have a book out called No Tracers, like I said at the beginning. If you want to check it out, head to notracers.com/shop. And if you guys are interested in checking out my second podcast, No Tracers, please do so. I'll put a link down in the description for that as well. But I will talk to you guys next Monday at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for another episode of Project Freelance. Thank you guys again. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out and go create something.